Illyra Voss had waited 3 years for her mate to notice her. She was the middle daughter of the Voss pack, born an Omega, in a family full of strong alphas and confident betas. That meant she had spent most of her life being overlooked. At council meetings, no one asked her opinion. At banquets, she was seated at the far end of the table, away from anyone important. And more than once, her own mother had reminded her, gently but firmly, that Omegas married for alliance, not for love. So when the bond mark bloomed across her wrist on the night of the blood moon gathering, a soft silver-blue light spreading under her skin, Illyra allowed herself, just for one evening, to believe that her life might finally change. She had watched the mark appear with her own eyes. She had felt the pull of it, warm and certain, the moment Chaol Draven, the reigning alpha king of the northern packs, walked past her. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. That feeling did not last. Her older sister Sable was golden-haired, quick-witted, and used to getting whatever she wanted. She had watched the mark form on Illyra's wrist with a stillness that Illyra, caught up in her own joy, mistook for surprise. She did not realize, until it was too late, that her sister was already thinking of ways to take this moment away from her. By morning, Sable had gone to Chaol alone, without telling anyone in the family. She told him the mark must have been a mistake. She said the moon's magic could easily confuse two sisters standing so close together during the ritual, and that she, Sable, was the one truly meant for him. She added, in a voice full of practiced concern, that Illyra was soft-spoken and eager to please, and would never argue if someone explained things to her kindly. Chaol was newly crowned. He did not yet understand the deeper traditions of Omega bonds, and he trusted the confident voice in front of him more than a quiet mark he barely understood. He believed her. The rejection happened in public, 3 days later, at the Alpha Council. Chaol stood in front of all the gathered packs and declared Sable Voss his intended mate. He called the bond mark on Illyra's wrist an unfortunate accident of the ritual, a small error that did not need to be taken seriously. The whole hall murmured in agreement. No one questioned a king. Illyra sat near the back of the room. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She had learned long ago that Omegas who argued were called dramatic, and Omegas who cried were called weak, so she allowed herself neither. She simply stood up and walked out before the applause for the new couple had even finished. Her wrist burned the entire way home, the silver mark refusing to fade, as if her own body knew something the king did not. For the next 6 months, Illyra built a new life far from her family's shadow. She left her father's territory and traveled east, to a quiet town where the Healers Guild trained anyone willing to work hard, regardless of rank or blood type. There, no one cared that she was an Omega. They only cared whether her hands were steady enough to set a broken bone, and whether she could read the old medicine texts quickly enough to help someone in pain. She threw herself into the work. She learned to stitch wounds, to mix healing herbs, to sit beside frightened patients and speak to them in a calm, steady voice until their breathing slowed. The work gave her hands something to do, and her mind something to focus on besides the ache in her chest. Slowly, without meaning to, she became someone new, someone respected, someone whose opinion people actually asked for. She did not attend her sister's engagement feast. She ignored her mother's letters demanding she return home to help plan the celebration. For the first time in her life, she stopped trying to make herself smaller so that everyone else could feel comfortable. The Voss family, who had always known exactly how to control her, suddenly did not know what to do with a daughter who no longer answered their calls. Meanwhile, back at the Northern Palace, King Chaol Draven was falling apart, though almost no one around him understood why. A true bond mark, once formed, does not simply disappear because a king wishes it away. Chaol began to grow sick in ways his royal healers could not explain. A hollow ache sat beneath his ribs, day and night. He stopped sleeping well. His wolf, the animal instinct that lived inside every shifter, grew restless and agitated, pacing in his mind like a caged animal that could feel something important just out of reach. Sable's presence, which should have calmed a true mate bond if the mark had truly belonged to her, did nothing at all. If anything, his wolf pulled away every time she came near, hackles raised, growling low in his chest in a way he could not control and did not understand. He told himself it was stress from the crown. He told himself many things. None of them were true, and deep down, he knew it. It was Oren, his old war advisor, a gray-haired beta, who had served 3 different kings before him, who finally said out loud what everyone else had been too afraid to mention. "Your wolf does not lie to you, my king," Oren said one evening, as Chaol sat staring into the fire, exhausted and pale. "Whatever your mind decided that day, your wolf never accepted her. If you want peace, you have to go and find the one your wolf actually chose." Chaol did not answer that night. But the words stayed with him, circling in his thoughts like a splinter he could not remove. 2 weeks later, unable to bear the constant ache any longer, he left the palace without telling anyone where he was going. He followed the pull of the bond, a faint but unmistakable thread that grew stronger the further east he traveled. It led him through 3 different territories, over rivers and mountains, until he finally arrived, unshaven and half-mad with exhaustion, at the gates of a small healers' guild in a quiet eastern town. He found Alira in the herb garden behind the guild house, just as the sun was beginning to set. Her sleeves were rolled up, her hands covered in soil, and she looked completely unimpressed by the sight of the Alpha King standing awkwardly in the garden gate. "You're supposed to be marrying my sister," she said, not even looking up from the plant she was tending. "I know," Chaol said quietly. "I was wrong." She did not run to him. She did not throw her arms around him and forgive everything in an instant. 3 years of being overlooked had taught her better than that. Instead, she simply kept working, pulling weeds from around a row of healing herbs, and let him speak. Forcefully, Chaol told her everything. He told her about the sickness that had taken hold of him since the day he rejected her, the ache that never left, the way his wolf refused to accept anyone but her. He admitted that he had chosen the easy path that night at the council, the path his advisors approved of, instead of listening to what his own body had been telling him from the very beginning. He told her that no crown, no alliance, no political comfort was worth the mistake he had made in front of the entire council. Alira listened without interrupting. When he finished, she finally looked up at him, her eyes calm but sharp. "You didn't just hurt me that night," she said. "You made it easy for everyone else to hurt me too. My own family stopped speaking to me. People in my old pack whispered that I made up the bond mark for attention. Do you understand what that cost me?" "I do," Chaol said, "and I'm not asking you to forget it. I'm asking for the chance to prove, slowly, that I've changed." She did not give him an answer that night. Instead, she told him he could stay in the town for a while, if he wished, and see for himself the life she had built without him. Chaol agreed. He stayed for weeks, working alongside the guild's healers, hauling water and firewood, learning names and faces, watching Alira move through her days with a quiet confidence he had never noticed in her before, because he had never bothered to look. Slowly, carefully, something between them began to heal. Not because Chaol demanded it, but because he showed up, day after day, without asking for anything in return. He listened when she spoke. He apologized again, more than once, without expecting instant forgiveness each time. He learned, for the first time, what it meant to earn someone's trust, instead of assuming it. Word of the king's long absence eventually reached the northern packs, and rumors began to spread. Sable, growing anxious about her position, demanded an explanation from the council elders, insisting that her betrothal was still valid, despite the king's unexplained absence. But the elders had also noticed the truth that could no longer be ignored. A true mate bond that a king's own wolf rejects, again and again, cannot be hidden forever, especially from those who understand the old ways. When Chaol finally returned to the palace, he did not return alone. Alira walked beside him, calm and steady, wearing simple traveling clothes instead of royal robes, looking every bit as unimpressed by the grand palace gates as she had been by the sight of him standing in her garden weeks earlier. The reckoning came at the next Alpha Council, held in the very same hall where Chaol had once publicly rejected her. The hall was full, every northern pack represented, whispers filling the air the moment Alira walked in beside the king. Sable sat rigid in the front row, her golden confidence cracking at the edges as she realized what was happening. Chaol stood before the assembled packs, his voice steady and clear. 3 months ago, in this very hall, I made a grave mistake. he said. I rejected a true bond, Mark, because it was easier to believe a comfortable lie than to face an uncomfortable truth. I let ambition and bad advice guide a decision that should have come from honesty alone. That ends tonight. He turned to Alira, and in front of the entire council, he named her, not her sister, as his true mate and future queen. He did not dress the moment up with flowery language. He told the hall plainly that he had wronged her, that his wolf had never accepted anyone else, and that he intended to spend as long as it took to make things right. Sable's protests fell apart almost instantly. A false mate claim made in front of a full council was not something easily excused, and the same elders who had once praised her confidence now watched her with the cold, careful eyes reserved for those caught in a lie. Whatever future she had imagined for herself crumbled in that single evening, undone by her own choices. Alira did not gloat. She had never wanted the crown for the sake of power, and she felt no joy in watching her sister's downfall. What she wanted, what she finally allowed herself to want out loud for the very first time in her life, was simply to be chosen honestly, by someone who had done the work to deserve her answer. She looked across the silent hall at Chaol, at the king who had finally listened to what his own heart had been trying to tell him from the beginning, and she said the only thing that truly mattered to her. Ask me properly this time. Chaol did not hesitate. He knelt before her, in front of the entire council, and asked her, with complete honesty and no hidden agenda, if she would choose to stand beside him as his queen, not because tradition demanded it, but because she wanted to. This time, in front of everyone who had once watched her walk out of that same hall in silence, Alira Voss said yes. The Healers Guild sent her letters for years afterward, teasing that their best student had traded bandages for a crown, though everyone who truly knew her understood that Alira never stopped being a healer at heart. Even as queen, she kept a small garden behind the palace, growing the same herbs she once tended in that quiet eastern town, a reminder of the life she had built for herself when no one else believed in her. And every year, on the night of the blood moon, Chaol would find her in that garden, and he would thank her, quietly, for giving him the chance to become someone worthy of the bond he had almost thrown away.